Now to growing panic among career civil servants in the federal government. The Trump administration's unprecedented removal of several top FBI officials and prosecutors who brought federal charges against President Trump or investigated January 6 rioters is stoking new fears that the president will further follow through on his threats of retribution. Joining us now is Washington Post democracy reporter Sarah Allison. Sarah, you have this new article out in the Post where you spoke to more than 24 Trump critics, and they talked about ways they're trying to protect themselves and their families should they become the target of this administration. What did they tell you? What really stands out from those conversations?
Well, thank you for having me. First, these are people, some of whom are not Trump critics at all. We spoke to people who are election officials who were just administering elections in their county or in their state. But what they told us, and we were talking to them even before some of the actions that you mentioned had been implemented, these are people who have been afraid of what is going to happen to them in a second Trump administration because Donald Trump has talked about how he is the retribution of his supporters. What these people told us is that they have been packing go bags. They have been preparing for who will take care of their children in case they are arrested. They have been sort of not conspiring, but talking with one another about how to handle these different threats. And they're particularly worried about Donald Trump's pick to run the FBI, Kash Patel, who has said explicitly that he wants to retaliate against people who tried to steal the last election, which we know was not stolen. Just there's no evidence for that, the 2020 election being stolen, and other actions that he and others in the Trump administration have promised to take, including lawsuits and other investigations that they have said that they will make.
I want to follow up on something you said because it really stood out to me in the article as well. I mean, people are so concerned they're going so far as to ask relatives, neighbors, friends to take care of their children in case they are, picked up and arrested.
Yes. I mean, a lot of the people, we have a few people in this story that were willing to talk to us on the record, and there were others who just did not want to draw additional attention to themselves. And I will say that the vast majority of the people that we spoke to were not the quote unquote famous names that you would think. It was not Anthony Fauci or, any of the, it was not Nancy Pelosi or the sort of the elected officials or appointees that you would think that you had heard in the news. But these are people whose names are largely not known to most Americans and are people who are worried. They have young children. They've been swatted while they're trying to watch movies with their children at night, and they are concerned about who is going to take care of their families if they are detained or picked up by some authority.
You also write that officials who were involved in administering the 2020 election are particularly worried about being targeted. And that includes Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who had armed protesters show up at her house. She said that since Trump was elected, quote, part of it is thinking through how, as a mom, I would prepare for my kids for FBI agents showing up at our door. But you say officials like her are looking for ways to also go on the offense against these Trump threats. How are they doing that?
So one of the things that Secretary Benson specifically mentioned was how there were certain individuals who Trump and his supporters really targeted the last time after the 2020 election. And you can take litigation, you can take private legal action against people who defame you. You can investigate other officials who might be threatening you. I mean, there are private actions and also other investigations that state officials can ask for if they feel they have been threatened by members of the Trump administration or simply his supporters. So again, those are the mechanisms that they're talking about using.
And very quickly, I understand the concern. People are very nervous. Do you think the concerns are legitimate, or do you think people are panicking? Do you think it's somewhere in the middle? How do you assess the real threat here? Very quickly, please.
Sure. Well, initially, people in the Trump White House were saying this is overblown. You shouldn't feel threatened. And then what we have seen in this past week are very specific actions taken by the Trump administration to actually take this kind of retribution. So I don't think it is overstated.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us.